Good afternoon and welcome to today's ACPE Academy webinar. My name is Mark Medwed and I'm the Program Manager at the ACPE. Today's webinar will focus on the innovative program award process. Since 2008, ACPE has offered funds for creative projects that expand CPE into new settings. Today we will shed some light on the criteria for this funding opportunity as well as tips on crafting the best possible application. Our presenters are Nancy Anderson, Manager of CPE at Spartanburg Regional Healthcare System, Vice Chair of the Foundation for ACPE and Chair of the Innovative Program Awards Committee, along with Jasmine Okafor, ACPE Development Specialist. At the conclusion of the presentation today, there will be an opportunity for you to submit questions. When you move your mouse on the screen, you will see a Q&A button. Click on the button and type your question. Please know that depending on the number of questions that are asked, it may not be possible to answer all of them as part of the webinar. Today's webinar is being recorded, and along with the slides from today's presentation will be available for playback from the ACPE Academy webpage. It is now my pleasure to welcome our presenters, Nancy and Jasmine.
Hello, everybody. We're welcome. Glad you're here. We're going to go through a PowerPoint, Jasmine and I, and kind of give you some of the facts and kind of the overview of how to do a grant. We wanted to do this because over the last couple of years, there's been so many incredible grants that have been given that have really changed the life of ACPE and the direction. They've worked so closely with the strategic plan and kind of brought, new life to some of the vision that we've had. So we just want to strengthen the process. We want to help you be more confident to apply for one. And we want you to feel very, very prepared as you write it up. So that's what we're hoping this overview will do. Since 2008, we've awarded over $139,000 to 27 innovative CPE programs. If you were at the national meeting in Denver, you were able to see some of the displays of these incredible grants that were awarded before today that have really made a difference in our life of our organization. Funded program awards by 20% of the money. We raise it by from the Sowing Seeds, which is our Holy Work annual campaign. This year we have $15,000 that it's available for funding. So the guidelines are very important to kind of very much help your grant kind of be around these guidelines. Don't leave any of these out. Be very attentive to them, address them, make sure that you are going along what is expected, but also be really, really clear about the things that you want to do with it. That will really help the committee itself invest as you're invested in the grant itself. So first of all, the strategic priorities. All projects must align themselves with the ACPE strategic priorities that you're very well familiar with. I'm sure if not, you can go on acpe.edu and you'll see those. Just make sure yours line up. State clearly how they do. Be clear and concise for the purpose of the requested money and how they will be administratively managed. So line by line, be clear about the amount. Don't. The more realistic you are, the more it helps the committee be able to not have to think outside the box, but just take it for what you are wanting it for. Innovation is the key. We want things that are new. We want things outside the box. Be as creative as you want to be. We want new ideas. We want your ideas to inspire the whole organization. We want your ideas, your grants to help somebody in another area feel like that's something that they can duplicate, that they can do as well. Remember that when you are submitting your grant, there's no funding for durable hardware, computers, phones, things like that. And it's a $5,000 maximum request. So your grant can't go over $5,000. It could go under $5,000 if you want, but don't go over the $5,000. And think of it as seed money, not ongoing operating expenses, and be sure that in your grant you let us know how you are going to continue funding it, what your plans are for that.
So during this portion of the webinar, we want to talk a little bit about some of the nitty-gritty, some of the nuts and bolts of crafting a really good proposal. So as the development specialist here with ACPE, I do my fair share of grant writing, and I find these tips to also be helpful as I craft the proposals that we send out for funding for larger ACPE projects. But hopefully some of these tips can be helpful for you all as well in crafting a proposal for the Innovative Program Award. So I would encourage everyone to start with setting SMART goals. I'm sure we've heard this language a lot in the past in different settings, but I really do find that this is the foundation for really crafting a strong proposal. So the S, as it relates to being specific, we really want you to be able to clearly state in 1 or 2 sentences the purpose of your project. So we're curious to know what you will do, how you will do it, and then why you're doing it. So the why is the rationale, and really making it clear to the committee why this project is important. So being able to state the what, the how, and the why in very clear sentences, and then expanding on it in the rest of your proposal narrative will be really helpful. M, measurable. That talks about defining a specific outcome that you want to achieve. So we're curious to know what your goal is for this project, and how are you planning on measuring it? Will it be through collecting data or stories, or is there some sort of change that you're hoping to see in a particular time? Be as clear as possible with that, and we would really appreciate knowing it in your proposal. Acceptable. This is one that the committee really cares about, and that's if this proposal or this project is meeting the criteria of what not only your organization values, but also what ACPE values, and is it aligning with the strategic priorities. If any of you have had a chance to look at the application already online, you will see that there are 4 check boxes that you can indicate which priority as it relates to ACPE strategic priorities that your project is aligning with. There can be more, but we do want to be sure that these projects are aligning with those priorities. So that's acceptable. The R is reach. So we want these projects to be ambitious, but we also want them to be realistic. And related to that is the question of sustainability. We found in evaluating proposals that lots of these ideas are great, but they don't seem to have any kind of thought process related to how one will sustain this project going forward. It's the committee's process to ask questions once we receive a grant proposal if there's something that we're unclear about. And it has seemed to be in the past years, and Nancy can attest to this, that most of our questions are around sustainability, meaning if this funding goes away, which it likely will, and once this timeline is done, how will you continue this project going forward? So we're really asking you all to put some thought into how realistic and how ambitious your projects are, and really pay attention to that sustainability question. And then finally, target or time bound. And this is telling us when your goal will be achieved, when your project activities will be achieved. And in the narrative portion of the proposal, there are times where you can really outline when you're expecting to get this done. So we want you all to be as clear and concise as possible, understanding that not all things happen in the timeline that we've set for ourselves, but really giving a general boundary of when those things are supposed to happen. So, a strong grant request has these following components. The first is a signed and completed application form. I know it sounds so elementary, but there have been times where the committee could not evaluate a proposal because the application form isn't complete and the appropriate signatures weren't there. So when you look at the application form, it asks for a signature from the project or program director. So it'll be many of you on this call for the most part, the person that's doing the majority of the work and overseeing it, but also the principal governing officer or chief administrative officer for your center. And we ask for that signature because we want to make sure that centers have the full buy-in of these proposals that are being submitted. So please don't make that very simple error in not completing and submitting a fully completed application form. The next portion will be your proposal outline and your narrative. And we've given the guideline of 3 pages for you all to fully articulate the projects that you've outlined. So we're asking that you submit a proposal that does not exceed 5 pages, and that includes the 1-page application form as well as a 1-page budget. So you have 3 pages of narrative that asks you to give a concise description of the program using those SMART goal guidelines that we've identified, as well as elaborating where you have the space to do so. And then a definitive timetable from the beginning and ending part of the project, as well as an explanation of how the program will be sustained in the future. So there may be some cases where you don't need the full 3 pages to do that, but know that you have a boundary of about 3 pages to fully expand on your idea. And then finally, a fully allocated and itemized budget that includes both the revenue for the project as well as the expenses. So more on budget. This is the fun part, and the part where the committee spends a great deal of time talking about and thinking of how do the limited resources they have available, how can they best use it to meet the needs of so many great projects and ideas that are out there. A little history, the committee has a practice, and in the application form, you'll see a question that asks you to indicate if partial funding is available. The committee has on more than one occasion granted partial funding for projects based on the overall request of what's available, and then what the asked for amounts are for each proposal. So we will be looking to see if our funding or your project can be supported with partial funding on what we can give, but also pay attention to that as well if partial funding is something that you would want to consider. But more importantly, we're looking to see if every activity that you're talking about in your proposal is represented in your budget. So if you're going to take students to a particular country, we're looking to see a travel expense line item. Even if you're not asking us to pay for it, we want to see it represented in the budget because it indicates to us that you thought thoroughly about each part of this project. We're also curious to know if your center is providing any support for the project. That indicates to us a level of buy-in. We know that not every place has the same amount of resources, but if your center is donating something, whether it be in-kind space or computer equipment, try to estimate a cost for that because that needs to be reflected in the budget for the project as well. And then reiterating, we're looking for grant requests to ACPE to not exceed $5,000. Even if the total project is more than $5,000, we're looking to see that your grant request from us won't exceed that. So when this draft budget that you see on your screen here, and by no means do you have to use this format, but it's a template to indicate the level of detail that we're looking for. You see a column for line item, you see a column for expense, and we understand that many of these expenses are estimate expenses. If you are awarded a grant, we will want the final to the cent expense that you spend, but your expense column. And then the source of the revenue, that's important for us too, to see some of the other potential funders you're targeting. And then telling us if this money is pending or secured. If the committee doesn't have a sense of that, they will raise some questions about it, and they will want to know if these monies are in the process of being received are already committed from another source. So we encourage you to think about those categories and crafting your budget so that it can be as clear as possible to the committee. Many of you have some really cool ideas for some projects that might be a good fit for the Innovative Program Award process. And we thought that we would highlight a project that we thought was a stellar example of what small dollars can do to really make a difference as it relates to expanding CPE into new and atypical settings. So this is a 2014 project awarded to the San Francisco Theological Seminary. Many of you may know Lori Garrett-Cabina. She was the ACPE supervisor that was the project manager for this project. And they were awarded $6,000 for this. They requested $8,000. Like I said, the committee does grant partial funding depending on the needs of the program as well as the overall request being received. So $6,000 was granted. And as we know, $5,000 this year is available per project as a maximum amount. But we thought this project was stellar or interesting for a lot of different reasons. So first, it was the first intercultural, interfaith, and ecumenical CPE unit taught in Ghana, West Africa. And many of you might ask, why Ghana, or why there? But prior to submitting this proposal, the center, San Francisco Theological Seminary, already had a relationship with Ghana and Ghanaian seminaries and cultural institutions. And so this wasn't some sort of one-off thing that a supervisor wanted to do, but it was grounded in some context. So we thought that was important to highlight. It was interesting in that they included global education and cultural immersion activities, such as visiting Cape Coast, where many enslaved persons came to the New World, and witnessing a culturally significant funeral rite, visiting the markets. All of these things were part of the students' CPE experiences. Cultural exchanges, cross-cultural exchanges was a great part of this. So you had U.S. students from a variety of ethnic backgrounds learn with Ghanaian students, many of them men, many of them who had not been in classes with women or others from various ethnic backgrounds learn together. So we thought that was an interesting thing that really lifts up one of ACPE's priorities. Students were able to facilitate sacred experiences, so getting some development and learning in that area. And there were interesting didactic seminars offered that really gave the perspective of global considerations for pastoral and spiritual care. So these were things that they outlined to the, or they shared with the committee of what they would do in their proposal. But the really cool thing about it is that their report actually reflected it. So they were really able to tell the story of what they learned and what they did through pictures and really interesting reflections that talked about the lessons that they learned. And these are some of the things that we're looking for as a committee, meaning how will your project translate or help other colleagues within ACPE learn about innovative approaches to our methods of education. How will these stories and lessons translate to others? And so we were really excited that their report was able to highlight some of the lessons learned. And hopefully, when you're crafting your proposal, you're thinking about that. How might my colleagues learn from what I'm doing? How might I reflect, or how might I articulate my project in such a way that others can reap some of the benefits or some of the things to stay away from as it relates to lessons learned? And that brings us to this whole notion of grant reporting. So if your proposal is accepted and awarded a grant, we will ask you to consider some grant reporting notions. And here are a few things that we would like for you to consider as it relates to grant reporting. Nancy, did you have any more comment on this slide here about grant reporting?
So if you could just walk through it, we want you to be creative. So you're going to include pictures, include videos, make sure your final budget, go over it, get some consultation before you submit it to us. Include a final narrative of activities and the lessons learned, and include any of the public relation materials or conference abstracts. And again, the question is, how does my project advance the field of spiritual care and education? We are partnering with you in your creativity, and we are honored actually to have so many creative people out there, and you're the eyes and the ears of ACPE throughout the country and actually even outside the country of the needs and the places where spirituality can grow in through the lens of education. So I think now we'll turn it over that you may have some questions that you would like to get answered, and we will be happy to do that.
As you're thinking about your questions, and hopefully you all have some, Nancy and I really want to use this time for you all to ask any question that you might need as relates to clarity or what have you of the process. But we did want to show you where you can find the application. So here in this PowerPoint, if you click here, see if it'll go there. This is this is a link to where you can find basically all of the things that Nancy and I outlined in the PowerPoint as it relates to guidelines and some of the criteria, as well as a link to the application. So you're welcome to pull that up, complete it, and email it as a PDF to me, jasmine@acpe.edu. But there is a link to this on the ACPE homepage, as well as the foundation homepage, which is, it can be found here at the donate button. But all of this information is here on the website for you to see as well. The deadline for all proposals is Friday, August 5th. I'll say it again, the deadline is Friday, August 5th. So please submit your applications by August 5th. Please know that if you have any questions beforehand, you're welcome to email me and I'll share them with the committee. But please make sure it's before August 5th. There's always a rush of proposals that are sent in then, but if you do need some extra clarification on some things, know that we are available if it's submitted before then, or if you ask before that deadline. All applicants will be notified of funding decisions by December 1, 2016. We tell you this to help with your planning. So the FCPE, Foundation for ACPE Board of Directors, will meet and consider all of the recommendations that the Program Award Committee puts to them at their November meeting. And at that November meeting, they'll make funding decisions. So everyone will be notified by the beginning of December.
So we'll just give you a few minutes to see if you have any questions at this time.
Let's see here.
You got that one, Jasmine?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, so this is, yep, questions are coming in. So we have a question that asks if funding is available for scholarships for students from underserved rural areas of the country. This is it depends on the nature of the request. So it would depend on the way in which the scholarships support the project that you're outlining. We will share that the committee deliberated heavily last year on scholarship requests as it relates to underserved students. Not saying that we don't find that to be a priority, but the question for the committee was all around sustainability and how you are purporting that the funding available for scholarships in 2016 or 2017 can continue or build some sort of support going forward. So if that's something that you're interested in doing, I will really craft the rationale for why it's important and how it will be sustained going forward as part of your proposal. Nancy, do you have anything to say about that as well?
No, I think that's good.
Yeah, good.
Do you want me to go on to question number?
Yeah, the second one we have here.
Okay. Should I read it? Everybody can see it, or?
Yeah, why don't you read it for them?
Okay. How may I fill in the budget when I'm still in communication with a funding organization and they will know the exact amount available not until November? That's a great question, and that has come up quite a bit. Just go ahead on your application and be in detail who the funding, amount is or who it is, how you have secured it, and just give us a general range. That should be fine if you have that limitation of not knowing if both are going to kind of get funded at the same time. But you need to have some assurance that that's going to happen. If that's going to be if you need both in order for the program to be successful. Jasmine, do you have anything you want to?
Yeah, that could be indicated by in your budget line writing pending. So if, $5,000 is requested from another source and you don't know when you'll be receiving it or if you'll be receiving it, I will put that line item as pending. And then maybe some explanation in your narrative as to your contingency plan, whether or not that funding comes through or not. But we do understand that it takes a while for certain things to shape up, but just let us know if that source is pending or secured in your budget. Just noting it there I think that'd be a good way to address it.
Yeah.
Let's see here.
So I'll read it, and Jasmine, maybe you can answer that one. So we are doing training using electronic video conferencing to rural areas in Montana. Small rural hospitals with less than 30 beds find it hard to support a student placed in their setting. Would funding be considered for such a placement setting to help support CPE training in their location?
I think definitely it will be considered because this project is aligning with ACPE's strategic priority of increasing, bringing more access to marginalized students as it relates to CPE. But again, it would be a question around, for me, it'd be a question around sustainability and how are you proposing that whatever you're requesting the dollars for, how are you supposing that seed money can help grow something in the future or can help sustain this project in the future?
Right. So
we can also, for the person who asked this question, we can also talk a little, if you have any more clarity, you're welcome to give us a call or send me an email and we could talk a little bit more about it. So another question is around research. This person wants to know if research projects addressing the strategic goals of ACPE, would those projects be considered for funding? And that answer is yes. We are interested in research projects. And again, I think the delineation of what the committee won't recommend for funding are those that what we might kind of see as very individualistic or self-centered. So if you're completing research for some sort of dissertation or PhD or graduate program that you're doing, and it might have some components related to clinical pastoral education or spiritual health or what have you, but it seems very narrow and limited, the committee will probably not be interested in funding some of that. But as it relates to research, they will want to know how can the questions you're proposing or the methodology that you're proposing, how can it be of help to their ACPE colleagues? So they will be looking for those kinds of maybe some insight as to how your lessons will be translated to ACPE more broadly and the field of spiritual care as well.
Yes, I think the research one is a great one, and definitely there is nothing that we would not consider as long as it was helpful to the organization. And as you well know, research is, because what you may start as a research project, if you get going on that, then somebody else might add into that research project as well, and you can be partnering with other people in ACPE as well over a particular research project that might be of great benefit to the organization as well as to the institutions in which we serve.
Great. Any other questions? I would maybe add, and this kind of comes from the question about rural access for students that are serving in rural areas. Please know that the committee is open to receiving proposals that are international, but also that are U.S. based. You know, please don't think that there's a preference there. They're also interested in receiving research oriented proposals, and new and atypical settings can mean a lot of things. So it can be urban areas where we don't have, you know, CPE centers, or rural areas where there is not a lot of access. So we encourage you to think broadly as to what is meant by new places, new settings. And for those who are more research minded or applying some theory practice based things into your proposals, testing new methodologies and trying new teaching strategies in CPE. So just wanted to reiterate that.
The next question is, do you ever offer second-year funding if a recipient receives a grant? I presume that the recipient would need to reapply. So great question. When you are applying for an Innovative Program Award, you are applying for a one-year grant. So these are not multi-year grants at the time of application. However, you can apply for another program award grant, maybe to continue the project or to do something different after your first project has been completed and you received funding. So there is an option to reapply, but when you are making that first application, it's only for a one-year grant. Great question.
Yeah.
Okay, it seems like we don't have any more questions. So we're going to go ahead and wrap up. And thank you to Nancy and Jasmine for today's presentation and for everybody for joining us. As a reminder, the recording of today's webinar as well as a slide presentation will be available on the ACPE Academy webpage, which is located on the ACPE website under the Resources tab. You'll also find information about future ACPE Academy webinars. And if you have additional questions that weren't answered, you can certainly reach out to Jasmine at jasmine@acpe.edu. We look forward to receiving applications. Thanks to everybody and have a wonderful day.
Thank you.
Thank you.